You finish a chapter, recognize every heading, and move through the second read faster than the first. That speed feels like learning. The sentences arrive before you have fully read them. The examples seem obvious. Confidence rises because almost nothing on the page feels surprising anymore. Then someone asks you to explain the central idea without the page open, and the answer does not arrive. You remember where the paragraph was. You may even picture the highlighted line. But you cannot produce the relationship the line was meant to teach. This is why rereading can be misleading. The problem is not that rereading never works. A second pass can repair confusion, restore context, or reveal structure that was missed the first time. The problem is using an open page to predict performance in a closed page situation. Seeing an answer and producing it later are different tasks, supported by different cues. Coriat and Bjork studied a version of this mismatch in paired associate learning. People studied word pairs and judged how likely they were to remember the target later. Their judgments were influenced by cues available during study. When the later test did not provide the same support, confidence could outrun recall. This was a controlled memory task, not a direct experiment on every book, course, or workplace procedure. Its value here is narrower. It shows why the conditions used to judge learning matter. Imagine reading a project policy while the heading, examples, and definitions are all visible. The policy feels clear because the document is doing part of the work. Later, during a meeting, you need to explain which condition triggers escalation. The heading is gone. The example is gone. The exact sentence is gone. If your only check was another smooth pass through the policy, you never measured the kind of access the meeting required. A broad review by Dunlosky and colleagues reached a related practical conclusion. Rereading can have benefits, especially after an initial exposure, but practice testing received a stronger general utility rating across the evidence they reviewed. That does not turn every quiz into good learning, and it does not make rereading useless. It means a second exposure and an attempt to retrieve serve different jobs. Rereading restores information. Retrieval tests whether you can produce it before the source restores it for you. The free 7-day recall experiment is linked below. It gives you a small place to test this distinction without building a flashcard system or turning every reading session into an exam. For a 2-minute version, use the closed source check. After one meaningful section, close the book, pause the course, or hide the documentation. First, state the central idea in one sentence. Second, add 2 details that would matter in later use: a condition, a contrast, a cause, or the first step in a sequence. Third, reopen the source and compare. Do not score yourself by how polished the first answer sounded. Look for the exact relationship that was missing or distorted. Suppose the section explains why a cache entry becomes stale. With the page closed, you say, "A cache becomes stale when it is old." That answer contains the label but misses the useful condition. You reopen the documentation and find that staleness depends on whether the cached representation still matches the authoritative state, not merely on age. The repair is small and precise. State the condition correctly, then answer once more. Another full reread would have made the paragraph familiar again, without necessarily fixing the decision rule. Hesitation is not a failure of the method. It is the measurement. A smooth page can hide a missing link because every sentence supplies the next cue. A brief recall attempt exposes the link while the consequences are still low. That is especially useful before the knowledge is needed in a client call, an assessment, or a production incident. Keep the boundary clear. Familiarity is not always false confidence. Recognizing terminology, seeing a worked example again, and rereading a difficult explanation can all contribute to learning. Initial study is necessary. References also belong in responsible work when exact, current information matters. The goal is not to memorize every specification or replace authoritative documentation. The goal is to know whether the central structure is accessible enough to help you recognize the situation, ask the right question, and find the correct detail. Use the check selectively. Do not close the source after every sentence. Choose the principle, condition, distinction, or sequence that will matter later. If the answer is empty, rebuild the first model instead of repeating a ritual. If the answer is partly correct, patch the exact gap. If it is accurate, move on and let a later return test durability. The form of the check should resemble the future demand. If later use requires a decision, do not test only a definition. Present a small case and name the condition that changes the choice. If later use requires explanation, retrieve the relationship rather than the heading. If later work will always provide a reference, remember the trigger and where to verify the exact detail. A closed source check is useful because it removes one support, not because closed book performance is always the final goal. For the complete system and its evidence boundaries, see the evidence-based learner. It connects this first measurement to retrieval, spacing, comparison, explanation, and transfer without promising perfect memory. Do not ask the open page to prove what the closed page has never tested. Close the source once, produce what later use will require, and see what remains.